Hi, my name is Deborah Stein, and I proudly serve as JDCA board member, political committee vice chair, and advocacy liaison. 2 weeks ago, the 2025 elections resulted in overwhelming Democratic wins, and JDCA was proud to play a role in mobilizing the Jewish vote with over 80,000 direct voter contacts and with ads that were seen more than 3 million times. As we prepare to continue this momentum into the midterms, Donald Trump is working hard to weaken our democracy, which may impact the way we conduct our elections and how the states conduct the redistricting of congressional districts. That's why today we're excited to be joined by 3 state attorneys general to discuss how we can preserve and defend our democracy. As state attorneys general, all 3 of our guests also play an important role protecting our community from anti-Semitism as the state's top law enforcement officers. I'm pleased to introduce our first guest, the Attorney General of my state of Arizona, Kris, who has served as AG since 2022 when she won one of the closest races in Arizona's history. Attorney General Mays has consistently fought to ensure free and fair elections and for representation when she sued House Speaker Johnson for his refusal to swear in Representative Adelita Grijalva. And earlier this month, Attorney General Mays presented oral arguments before the Supreme Court arguing that Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal and unconstitutional. I'm now pleased to welcome my fellow JDCA board member, Amy Kaplan, who will introduce our other guests.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm Amy Kaplan. I'm proud to be a JDCA board member and the vice chair of our policy committee. And I'm speaking to you from Ohio, where I don't have these great kind of attorney generals in my state. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this program. Dana Nessel is Michigan's 54th Attorney General and a nationally recognized advocate for civil rights and democratic integrity. Since taking office, AG Nessel has led efforts to combat hate crimes, protect LGBTQ+ rights, defend election workers, and hold extremists accountable across the state of Michigan. We're also joined today by Attorney General Phil Weiser from Colorado. AG Weiser is a leading voice on democracy protection, civil rights, and public safety. Since taking office, he's championed efforts to strengthen election security and support communities targeted by rising extremism, including in the aftermath of the recent anti-Semitic attack in Boulder. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and I will turn it over now to JDCA CEO Halie Soifer so we can get started.
Thanks so much, Amy, and thanks to all 3 attorneys general for joining us today. All 3 of you are a bulwark for the rule of law and the defense of democracy in each of your states. And we have never seen such persistent attacks on both and from the federal government. So how are each of you responding to Donald Trump's overreach in your states? And just generally, what is it like to serve in this role in 2025? Attorney General Nessel, we'll start with you.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a surreal time is really the most that is the best way, I guess, to frame all of this. We've never seen so many illegal acts coming from the federal government. I would suggest that perhaps if you took all the illegal acts of every administration and you compiled them together, I don't know if it would equate to the illegalities that we're seeing. And again, I only had a chance for a couple of minutes to sort of scan through things that are happening right now at a national level, but even in terms of the James Comey case right now, some things that we've never seen from the Department of Justice ever before. But I think that, I will say for myself, for really all of the Democratic attorneys general, we are utilizing this time to work as tenaciously as we can to combat illegal actions by the federal government by using our respective offices to file litigation. Again, understanding none of us wanted to see Donald Trump become president again, but he is the duly elected president of the United States. That brings with it broad authority, but it does not permit him to violate the law, to flagrantly violate the Constitution, administrative norms, and all the rest of it. So we are spending this time, among other things, filing lawsuits against the federal government, and in large part, having a lot of success doing so in order to protect our state residents.
Great. Attorney General Mays, how are you responding to Donald Trump's overreach in your state, and what has it been like this past year?
It's been wild. I agree with Dana, surreal, wild, intense, unprecedented. But, you know, I think what I think we all take comfort in is the fact that we are in a partnership, the 23 Democratic attorneys general. Certainly, I wish some Republican AGs would join us, but not one Republican AG has joined the Democratic AGs in a single lawsuit standing up for our Constitution against this runaway and rogue unconstitutional presidency. In Arizona, we have filed 30 lawsuits against Donald Trump and DOJ. I think Dana's probably filed a few more, Phil, maybe a few more. Each state is a little bit different, but we're doing these lawsuits in partnership. And so we filed them together. You know, a couple of states, the way it works is a couple of states will take the lead and the rest of us will join, or a group of us will join depending on the issue, whether it's birthright citizenship or the tariffs. We just had the oral arguments at the Supreme Court on the tariffs issue. I co-led that with Oregon's AG. But we are doing this in partnership, and we're winning 80% of the time. We're getting a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction. We're winning. We added up the value of the 30 lawsuits that I have filed for Arizona. It totals $1.5 billion because we stopped Trump collectively from defunding Head Start, defunding Meals on Wheels, defunding AmeriCorps, destroying our Department of Education funding, destroying my efforts to combat the Mexican drug cartels, which is insane, but that's what Donald Trump was trying to do. And so if I wasn't here, if Dana wasn't in Michigan, if Phil wasn't in Colorado, each of our states would be being harmed by that amount of money or more. And so that's how we're doing it. We meet together, you know, by Zoom on one of these Zooms 2 or 3 times a week to work on this litigation, to protect our country, and to be, as you said, Halie, a bulwark for our country, and to try to get us through to 2026 and beyond that to 2028. So I guess that's how I would answer that question. And then in my case, I had to sue Speaker Mike Johnson and the House of Representatives once.
We're going to come back to that.
Natalie de Grijalva, yeah.
We're coming back to that one.
Okay.
Okay. Attorney General Weiser, same question for you.
Thank you, Halie. The phrase that Dana Nessel used, surreal, is a fair and appropriate description. What we have been witnessing, what we are living through, what we are fighting against is nothing like any prior administration. I want to highlight how different the second Trump administration is from the first Trump administration. The first Trump administration had lawyers, Rod Rosenstein, take one example, who said, you cannot do this. There were guardrails that said you cannot do this. In the second administration, those guardrails, those lawyers who defended the rule of law are nowhere in evidence. What do I mean by that? In the first Trump administration, I served for 2 years. I brought 11 lawsuits, and many of those lawsuits, like the ones protecting the Dreamers or defending the census, those lawsuits were from issues that happened before I took office. So in effect, it was like 4 years, 11 lawsuits. We're not even 1 year. I'm up to 43. My standard has not changed, but the lawlessness, the recklessness, and the harm from this administration is different than any other administration. I continue to see cases, for example, the ones dismantling AmeriCorps, a bipartisan program that did so much good, established by Congress, and this executive branch tried to dismantle it. I don't understand how any lawyer could have told them that was acceptable. I don't understand how anyone who understands what AmeriCorps does would want to dismantle it. But I had to go to court with other colleagues. We led that case, and we secured the funding for AmeriCorps. I want to give you an example of a more recent case that only involves Colorado because it gets to the essential attack on our Constitution. We are now witnessing historic challenges for our Constitution. I think Dana's point about the Comey case is worth coming back to, but let me stick with a case I had in Colorado. President Trump said, I'm moving Space Command from Colorado to Alabama. In normal times, in non-surreal times, the decision would have been accompanied by some study, some analysis, some process that explained the reasoning. Not in this administration. The president just said, the big reason why I'm doing this is I don't like Colorado because it has mail-in elections. When you read the Constitution, it says who gets to decide the time, place, and manner of elections. It's states. It's not the president. He's seeking to punish Colorado for our exercise of our constitutional authority. That's BS. We're not going to allow it. That's why we're in court challenging that decision.
Great. Well, Attorney General Mays, you previewed for us this issue that feels very timely that we want to dig into a bit more. So amid Speaker Johnson's 7-week delay to swear in Attorney General Congresswoman Adelina Grijalva, we organized 19,000 signatures on a petition demanding that he do his job. You did even more, though, because during this time, you filed a lawsuit demanding that he swear her in. So we're interested in hearing about this lawsuit, what it meant for the people of Arizona's 7th Congressional District, that he had for so long refused to seat the representative that they had elected in September. And are you concerned about future elections, such as we have one in Virginia coming up in just a few weeks, where if a Democrat wins, they may not be immediately sworn in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, yeah, thank you for the petition. Thank you for supporting Adelita. You know, she obviously was duly elected. She won by more than 70% of the vote. And for 6-7 weeks, we had 813,000 Arizonans experiencing taxation without representation, which we fought a revolutionary war over. And so, you know, it was just outrageous that Mike Johnson thought that he could do this and get away with this. And every week that passed was a week that Adelita could not get to work for her constituents, including dealing with a flood that happened in her district and, helping veterans with benefits, et cetera, everything that a member of Congress does. So as the top law enforcement and legal officer of my state, I felt we had to do this. And so we filed that lawsuit. The law and the Constitution does not allow the Speaker of the House to not seat a duly elected member of Congress. There are qualifications, but once the person has met those qualifications and once the election has been certified, the Speaker cannot do that. And there are implications for the future of this behavior. And I hope to goodness gracious that this never happens again. Obviously, we didn't have to take it to court because he finally swore her in because the shutdown ended, I guess. But also, I think he finally swore her in because of the pressure and the lawsuit. But it is important as we head into 2026 and these, upcoming elections that we push back against this, because just imagine what one speaker could do. I mean, essentially could overturn an entire election and could stop, what looks to be a good year and a year in which probably Democrats are going to do really well in the upcoming 2026 midterms. Imagine if the Speaker just decided not to seat all of those people, which would be blatantly unconstitutional. But, similar things have happened in the past.
Absolutely. We are concerned about. Attorney General Weiser, you are the son of a Holocaust survivor, and you have spoken about the importance of your Jewish faith and your values in driving your public service. Earlier this year, there was a horrific attack on Jewish Americans in your state, in Boulder specifically, which led to the tragic killing of at least one Coloradan. How did you respond to this attack as Attorney General, and what measures are in place, including what strengthened measures have been put in place to defend Jewish Coloradans against any future anti-Semitic attacks?
I want to start by talking about how I responded to it personally, because I knew people who were there. And we have to be clear-eyed that attacks on Jews, Jew hatred, anti-Semitism is a hate crime that has to be called out for what it is, with no apologies or no buts. This is, to me, the difference between a comma and a period. Attacks on Jews are wrong, period. Attacks on Blacks are wrong, period. Attacks on gays are wrong, period. And when you are seeing rising hatred, motivating violence, and obviously this year we had the attack on Josh Shapiro's residence during a Passover Seder. We had Jews killed in Washington, and a lot of us are concerned about this rising violence. And so my response, Halie, is sort of two-pronged. First, moral clarity. We can't ever say Jews were killed, comma, but. There's no but. There's no justification. We have to be clear that hate-motivated violence, hate crimes are wrong, are a threat to our body politic, and have to be called out and condemned. Second, how can we make sure that we are developing the right type of warning systems and accountability and protections to keep people safe, so that Jews going to Hillel on a college campus aren't worried, or Jews in a peaceful march who are concerned about the plight of hostages who had suffered so much aren't afraid. One of the sayings in our tradition that my family sings Friday nights is teaching from a rabbi, Nachman of Breslov, that says the whole world is a narrow bridge, and the important thing is not to be afraid. So I am not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be paralyzed by fear. I'm not going to stop being proud of being Jewish. And I'm going to make sure we build protections. And in Colorado, we have them. There's some national funding too that protects religious institutions who are vulnerable. And one of the important moments in Colorado during my public service was after there was an attack on a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. I and other members of the Jewish community were at the mosque. And when there was an attack on the Tree of Life synagogue that was in Pittsburgh, people from our Muslim community came to support us as well. We have to build alliances, and the ADL has a very important message, which is hate against any of us has to be treated against hate as if it's against all of us. That's a key lesson from the Holocaust. As you know, I'm from a family of Holocaust survivors. My mom was born in the Buchenwald concentration camp on April 13th, 1945. It's a miracle that I'm here. I recommend strongly to everyone the movie Nuremberg, which I just saw. The face of hatred, whether it's from the Holocaust, whether it's from October 7th, or what we saw in Boulder, we have to acknowledge it. We can't hide from it. We can't pretend it's anything else. We've got to see it. We've got to bear witness. We got to call it out.
Thank you. Attorney General Nessel. So I am from Michigan, and even growing up, there was concern, this is in the 80s and 90s specifically, about extremists in Michigan. When I was growing up, they were known as the Michigan Militia. In Trump's first term, we saw the rise of the Proud Boys and others whom we know had stronghold in Michigan. So if you could talk about the rise of right-wing extremism, including in Michigan, and your efforts, including passage of the Michigan Hate Crimes Act to combat anti-Semitism and support victims of hate crimes and targets of right-wing extremism in your state.
Yeah, so first of all, in response to your question, I think it's important that we are cognizant of the fact that it's not just right-wing extremism against the Jewish community that we have to be concerned about now. It is right-wing attacks on the Jewish community, but is also extremists on the left. And we have to acknowledge that, or we'll never be able to effectively combat it. But that being the case, in 2019, when I took office, one of the first things I did was to create a hate crimes and domestic terrorism unit of the office, understanding the exponential rise that we had seen in hate crimes against many different communities, including against the Jewish community. So we immediately started to take, directly from communities' complaints and to process those complaints, working with local law enforcement. And in the course of that, dozens and dozens of cases that we prosecuted, including notably the Wolverine Watchmen. They were the group that plotted to kidnap and assassinate Governor Whitmer. We also had a large-scale investigation and prosecution of a group called The Base, operating in the Thumb area of Michigan, because as everyone knows, Michigan looks like a hand or a glove. But they were a white supremacy group. They had put together an organization with plans, designs on a significant mass casualty event, and we were able to successfully prosecute them. We also worked on changing the hate crimes law. We didn't really have something called the hate crimes law. We had something called the Ethnic Intimidation Act, but it was incredibly weak. And I look at hate crimes laws in general as what I'd like to say is murder prevention, which is if we can prosecute cases where you have more minor acts that clearly are bias oriented, property offenses, or assaults that are minor in nature, or threats, then hopefully we're able to prevent that from escalating into what will at some point potentially turn into a homicide. If you can get intervention by the judicial system at an earlier time, that's going to be helpful later on, making sure that it doesn't turn into something much bigger and it doesn't escalate. So we changed the hate crimes law, and we put more teeth in it. We expanded the number of groups that were considered to be classes that within it, including the sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and age. And we added that to religion and nationality and race and gender. And we put more penalties in it, understanding that it's a much more serious set of circumstances if somebody is armed with a firearm during the course of a hate crime, or if you are adults targeting juveniles, or if you are working as a group as opposed to a single person. So we made some of those changes. We created an institutional desecration act, understanding that graffiti on the side of a railroad car is it's a much different act than when you spray paint a swastika on a synagogue, or you light up a cross on a black church. That those things need to be treated differently, because these are messaging crimes, and they're intended not just to victimize one person who might own a piece of property, but to instill fear into an entire community. And so now we treat those crimes much more seriously than we did before. We've also worked, and I just testified a few weeks ago, on changing our anti-terrorism law, changing the language to comport with a recent United States Supreme Court decision, because our anti-terrorism law, which was the only thing standing between massive threats that could shut down an entire state government, for instance, and not having any laws really to enforce that, because our state law did not comport necessarily with what this United States Supreme Court case, the Counterman case, indicated, because we have to be able to prosecute these cases so that people don't have to live in fear. And I would use as an example, just a couple of months ago, you might have heard of a horrible attack on a Church of Latter-day Saints church during church services, where several people were killed. And we're lucky, actually, that the number wasn't in the many dozens, if not hundreds of people in that case. But understanding that had there been some intervention earlier, we probably could have saved people's lives. And I think recognizing in retrospect what we could have done differently in that case. So, it's just recognizing that hate crimes, it's incredibly important that we take them seriously. And that if we do take them seriously, then hopefully we can avert much more serious sets of circumstances from developing later.
Great. Attorney General Hayes, you had referenced this earlier, so coming back to it, you talked about the fact that the 23 Democratic attorneys general are working together, and I believe have filed close to 30 lawsuits against this administration. Can you talk about this cooperation and its role in defending our democracy and free and fair elections in our states?
Yeah, and yeah, just to sort of elaborate on that, I think it's been incredibly important, and I think both Phil and Dana were around during Trump 1.0, and they experienced 1.0, and Trump 2.0 has been even worse. I think what's really special about the way the attorneys generals are working together is that, well, number one, we do this without much ego. We sort of check our egos at the door, and you know, just and we have, you know, basically, you know, individual law offices in each state, some of the best lawyers in each of our states working on these cases to protect our democracy, and we attack those issues as they come up. So the first thing that we had to deal with was the birthright citizenship executive order that was issued by Donald Trump, essentially trying to strike out the 14th Amendment. And we filed that lawsuit together, all 23 of us, immediately. And it took a Reagan-appointed judge 25 minutes to declare that blatantly unconstitutional. And I think we are going to win that case. And you know, we have you know, had, you know, seen attacks by the Trump administration on our election system. He issued an executive order to try to basically commandeer all of our elections in our states. We fought back against that and won. We have fought back against the attempts of this administration to invade the privacy of Americans inside the IRS through DOJ, which is trying to hoover up everyone's private data inside the IRS, inside Medicaid, and we've been fighting on all these fronts, and working as best we can together to do those lawsuits is obviously you know, difficult, and but it's something that we are dedicated to doing, and it has been incredibly important on so many fronts that really are important to everyday Americans. I mean, the SNAP lawsuit is another good example. Donald Trump was illegally attempting to deny $5 billion worth of SNAP benefits to our states. And in Arizona here, that meant 900,000 Arizonans could have gone hungry in the month of November as we headed into Thanksgiving. And so we fought back against that, filed a lawsuit, and I'm going to continue to do that. I know that my colleagues, Dana and Phil, feel just as strongly, and we're going to run through the finish line.
Great. Attorney General Weiser, and I should have been clear, I'm now incorporating audience questions. So I'm compiling them and asking a few at once. All the litigation successes are laudable, and thank you for your hard work. This is coming from the audience. But this administration simply disregards judicial orders. So what has been the biggest challenge serving as AG when there's administration that has ignored the law? And how has this shaped your service as AG this year, including as we head into an election year next year?
I want to offer two answers. The first is, in our cases, they've actually been by and large following court rulings. And I have counted up, it's over $1 billion we've gotten back because of our cases. And there's a good article, a CNN article, I'm not sure I can post in the chat here, but if I would, it is a worthwhile portrait that some of our cases that Dana, Kris, and I, others have brought, mean that our states are getting money that our red state colleagues are not. And so there are real implications, real bottom line consequences if your attorney general is afraid to stand up for the rule of law. Other cases, birthright citizenship, we don't think you can actually have a protection of this freedom that is not, bless you, that is not across the US. We think it would be a complete nightmare. So we're going to seek a universal injunction there. We have one that'll be before the Supreme Court as well. So I would say, I hear the fear. I know there have been some cases, the case involving Mr. Alberto Garcia, for a while there was a refusal to follow a court order. But in the main, in our cases, they are following the orders. To the question, part of what we need to do, it's one of many criticisms I have about the recent shutdown effort, is we've got to shine a light on the lawlessness of in this administration. We've got to make it a voting issue that if you want to live in a republic, if you want administration that is under the law, not acting above the law, a government under law, that's on the ballot. Because part of what's happening now that should not be happening is Congress is not doing its job as a coordinate branch of government. Congress is not overseeing the lawlessness administration. They're leaving it all to us and the courts to act as a check, and that's not how it should be. Congress needs to step up for its power. A lot of the cases we're bringing, they're separation of powers violations. Congress can and should speak up. The Epstein vote we just saw is a good example, maybe the first of more, where Congress is willing to show some backbone, willing to push back on a president who doesn't understand or appreciate the way our system of government works. Have a republic as long as we can keep it. I'll be fighting to keep it.
Thank you. AG Nessel, we frequently hear, and I'm seeing some questions about elections, we frequently hear concern about the future of our elections, and we definitely see, as we approach 2026, Republican-led efforts to redistrict, and there are some other efforts regarding, voter suppression that have been enacted in particular states. What do you say to the people of Michigan regarding the future of elections, whether it be in Michigan or frankly any other state, in terms of them being free and fair? And on a related note, somewhat related, we have a question regarding Donald Trump's threat to run again in 2028.
Yeah, well, that's a lot. Firstly, I have deep concerns about the future of free and fair elections. Given all the misrepresentations, obviously, that we've seen about previous elections, that we know are lies, and we know that in the past our elections have been free and fair, despite what Trump and his allies continue to say about the 2020 election. I fear that I will look back with nostalgia as to the things happening during the 2020 election. And I should tell you that, Phil and myself and many of our colleagues, we had to get a court order regarding efforts by the U.S. Postal Service to make it much more difficult for the post office to properly process mail-in ballots during a time period, of course, where we were in the height of COVID. And I remember the day before the election in 2020, actually having to go into 2 separate distribution centers with my court order and start picking out what I could see were absentee ballots that were just stuck. Some of them were postmarked from 6 weeks earlier, and they were just sitting there. And I had to say, deliver that, deliver that, deliver that. I mean, it was an insane scenario. But having to have conversations with the U.S. attorneys in the eastern and western districts of Michigan and say, hey, you guys aren't going to try to interfere with the elections, right? And they're like, no, of course we're not going to do that. And then followed by the next day, Bill Barr issuing new guidance that was in contravention of, decades of policy of the feds not becoming involved before certification occurred. Now, I look back and say, gosh, I wish we had an Attorney General of the United States that was as ethically bound as Bill Barr. Now I look back at that and say, like, he was the greatest, U.S. attorney imaginable, or Attorney General. But I have deep fears about what the DOJ is going to do now. And I should tell you that our minority leader in the state Senate just called for the DOJ to come in and take over our elections in Michigan next year in 2026. And the reason that he utilized is that our Secretary of State is running for governor, so of course we can't trust her. Well, I don't know. We had pretty free and fair elections 4 years ago when she ran for re-election as Secretary of State. And we've had many secretaries of state that have run for their own office or different offices. And we've never had the feds had to take over our elections before. Our elections are extremely decentralized in Michigan. So we have about 1,600 local clerks that oversee the elections. And then we have county boards of canvasser where we have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So it's an extremely fair process. Whenever we hear there being suggestions of some sort of inequities, it will be like literally a handful of cases in a case where you might have had some 6 million people who voted, and that wouldn't have had any impact on the election at all. But those cases get blown up as though to suggest that you can't trust the system at all. And I think that's what the Trump administration has wanted to do. Because if you can't win an election, then you could at least, sort of indicate oh, well, this election wasn't fair. That's why a certain candidate didn't win. And of course, you see these instances too, right? Where the president himself is saying, if you vote for a candidate that is not my candidate of choosing, you're not even going to get federal funding, which is also election interference. Is it not? I mean, I can't believe we don't talk more about that. But I will say this, in the past, we've had the cooperation and the assistance of the federal government. And again, going back to 2020, I worked directly with the federal government and the social media platforms to take down misinformation and disinformation about the election. And I'm not talking about, disparaging a particular candidate or something. I'm talking about time, place, manner of elections. Somebody putting something up on Facebook or on Twitter, saying, oh, there's a bomb at a particular precinct in the city of Flint. So trying to scare people from voting in the first place, and making sure that that was taken down so that people didn't feel afraid to vote. We worked really well back then with the social media platforms. That's not the case anymore. We're no longer, we don't have partnerships with Meta anymore. We don't have partnerships with now what is X anymore. And if anything, I think they're contributing, sometimes intentionally, to the distribution of misinformation about the elections. So there are a lot of things to be concerned about. All I can say is that in our state, we are fighting back vigorously, and we will fight back in the courts as much as we possibly can, and then hopefully have the same successes that we've had in the past. We are fighting back in terms of using our bully pulpits to let people know what is true and what is not true. And we are going to continue to fight to have, a functional democracy. But I will say it's a lot more difficult when we don't have the support of the Department of Justice. And that's going to be just one more very difficult hurdle or obstacle that we're going to have to overcome.
Thank
Halie,
you.
could I add
Yeah,
something
please
to
go
that?
ahead.
So I totally agree with Dana on all of those points. And I would just add, one of the things that I worry about is, what the Trump administration might try to do with regard to intimidating voters by, sort of first of all, normalizing the use of the National Guard in cities, normalizing the use of federal agents for widespread immigration enforcement operations that become very intimidating in certain communities, how those federal agents might be deployed. You could see, a scenario in which they try to deploy them in a way that intimidates people from going to the polls. And thankfully here in Arizona, we have, I think we've got 90% of our voters use vote by mail. So that might, alleviate some of those concerns, but still a lot of people like to go to the polls. Those are the kinds of things we worry about. And then on intimidation and harassment front, after 2020, we saw here in Arizona, 2/3 of all of our county elections officials, and elections department saw the resignation of a top election official because of harassment and intimidation. In my home county, Yavapai County, the election director resigned because her dog was killed. And so, that's, what I have been saying as AG is we will not tolerate that kind of thing. We will prosecute threats and harassment and violence against elections officials. And we will not tolerate things like hand counts, which are illegal in Arizona, which are designed to delay the counting of the vote.
Great. And AG Weiser, do you want to get in on this as well? It seems critically important. And honestly, it is something that we continue to hear about from Jewish voters, their concern about the future of our democracy.
Dana made a point I want to pick up on. When I think about our Constitution, I have even more reverence for those who framed it. The fact that elections are handled by states is an incredibly important safeguard. I was at the Supreme Court arguing a case involving a faithless elector who wanted to go rogue, and my principle was that Colorado gets to decide how people vote. Electors are not free agents who could be extorted, pressured, or bribed. They're bound agents. And we won that case defending the integrity of our election system. It's very important that we do not have federal encroachment, intimidation, or any intrusion into elections. The mechanics of state-managed elections are an incredibly important safeguard. We take it seriously in Colorado. I mentioned that the president attacked our voting system, saying that mail-in balloting, he used this phrase, are automatically crooked. Another total lie. Our elections have been praised, implemented by Democrats and Republicans alike. There's mail-in elections in Utah. They elect Republicans. We elect Democrats. It's about maximizing people's ability to vote and have their voices heard. Colorado has the second highest voter participation of any state because we make it safe, easy, and secure to vote. That's the way it should be. And this president's playing games is inexcusable, outrageous. They can't be allowed to succeed.
Great, thank you. And something that I always ask any of our participants on these Zooms is reason for hope, because honestly, we are hopeful, and it does sound, even in this conversation, which there are plenty of challenges that we're facing, that you're facing in particular. I am left somewhat hopeful by each of you being so strong in your conviction and your efforts to fight these attacks on our democracy and the threats to our community as well. And I'm really grateful to each of you. But if you could leave us with some reasons that you're hopeful, and we'll start with you, AG Nessel.
Yeah, well, I would say a combination of things have buoyed me a little bit in terms of the constant churn of negative and really terrifying news that we see each and every day. Firstly, the No Kings rallies and having over 7 million people come out. People from again, we didn't just have these rallies in our major cities. We had them in very small towns, rural areas. We had them in the suburbs, and certainly we had them in the cities, where we had, again, millions of people come out and say, we're not okay with this, and we don't believe in kings. And we had, following that incredible rally, we had the elections of a few weeks ago, where we saw an overwhelming response to what we've seen from the Trump administration, and record number of voters, and of course Democrats sweeping. Whether you're talking about the races in Virginia, where we picked up another attorney general, by the way, for the Democrats, which was a big deal for us. The races in New Jersey, and all across the nation, record turnout, basically sending the message that we don't support the illegalities and the attacks on our democracy by the Trump administration. And then lastly, our wins in the courts. The courts are recognizing these illegal activities. And just last night, I was reading about the challenge to the redistricting in Texas. And you had a judge that was appointed by Donald Trump on the Fifth Circuit skewering The redistricting of adding the 5 extra, basically, Republican-leaning seats and trying to disenfranchise minorities in the state of Texas. So to see a Trump appointee himself, who had a close relationship with Governor Abbott, basically really attacking Governor Abbott and saying, all of the many reasons why the redistricting violated the Constitution. I mean, that gives me great hope. That gives me great hope when I see that. And we see it day in and day out, judges of who were appointed by presidents of both parties, who are coming out and saying this is illegal, this is unconstitutional, and this cannot stand. And so I think those 3 things together give me hope for the future, that the majority of people in this country are not okay with what's happening at all levels, and that we're going to fight back to preserve all the things that truly make America great.
Thank you. AG Mays?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I couldn't agree with Dana more, and I would just say, similarly here in Arizona, we've seen huge turnout for the No Kings rallies, and at the town halls that many of us have been doing. The AGs have been doing town halls about the litigation. Huge turnout at those town halls. And I did the last No Kings rally here in Phoenix. We had 15,000 people turn out. The prior one, I went up to my hometown, probably one of the most conservative places in America, Prescott, Arizona, and 3,000 people turned out in my hometown in this Republican stronghold. And I remember I was standing on the courthouse steps of Prescott where Barry Goldwater announced his presidential bid. And I quoted Barry Goldwater on tyranny to this huge crowd of concerned Americans. And I looked out into the audience, both at the rally in Phoenix and the one in Prescott, and I saw an enormous number of Vietnam War veteran hats, veterans who came out and who are appalled at what is happening in this country that they fought for. And every time I file one of these lawsuits with my colleagues, Phil and Dana and the others, I always think about the past generations of Americans who fought and died and sacrificed for this country. And I believe in my heart that those past generations of Americans are speaking to us across the ages. And they are saying to each and every one of us, including everybody on this call and the AGs, fight for your country and do it now, because 2 years from now is too late. And I just think once in a generation, Americans are called upon to stand up for their country. And now is our time. And so that's what we're going to continue to do that as AGs. And I just appreciate this group for doing everything that it does to stand up for our country.
Thank you. AG Weiser?
Let me end on a few notes. First, sort of religious and spiritual. I mentioned before, the whole world is a narrow bridge, and the important thing is not to be afraid. Kris just evoked another teaching, which is you do not have the obligation to complete the work of repairing our world, but you're not free to desist from doing your part. Everyone on the Zoom is asking, how do we do our part, whether it's showing up at No Kings rally, supporting candidates, using your voice. I am term limits Attorney General. I'm now Ronnie Picaro's next governor because I want to keep doing my part. I want to keep staying in this work of repairing our world. For me, that is personal. And I mentioned before my grandmother's story, survival. My grandmother got pregnant in a Nazi concentration camp and sent to my grandfather a note that said, you have what to live for. He and she held on to hope during very dark times. They persevered and they were able to build a new life here in the United States of America, and they loved this country and believed in our values. That's why it's so personal for me to fight for it. And finally, a story about Billy Adams, a former Colorado governor who I look up to, served from the southern part of our state when the Klan controlled Colorado state government. He took on the Klan, They sought to defund the college in the southern part of the state, then called Normal College. The community raised money to keep the college going. Billy Adams stayed in the fight. He became Colorado's governor and beat the Klan. We cannot be intimidated. Too many people are afraid and paralyzed by fear. Too many people are intimidated. What Kris said is right. We need to show up. We cannot be afraid. And at the end of the war, my grandfather was having a crisis of confidence. And my grandmother said, you can't give up on our future. You can't give up on our faith. That will be as if Hitler won the war. And I mentioned before this movie Nuremberg, which speaks to this moment. We have to recognize that we are not automatically entitled to live in a democratic republic. The principles that drew my grandparents here, freedom, equality, opportunity for all, they're not guaranteed. We have to fight for them. We have to stand for them. I believe the American people will. I believe 2026 is a crucial time. All of us living this time will keep doing what our part. That's what gives me hope.
Great. Well, thank you. Each of you has given us hope today and gives us hope. And I will just echo a comment that has been put in the chat, I believe, by Beth. Thank you for this, Beth. I'm so incredibly grateful to these attorneys general and their strength, wisdom, and integrity. They are truly making a difference protecting our democracy. We couldn't agree more. So thanks to each of you for your leadership. We're looking to you. We're grateful for you. And thanks for joining us today. I'm now going to turn things over to Bobby Saferstein, our Chief Program Officer, to wrap up today's event. Bobby.
Thank you, Halie, and thank you to Attorneys General Nessel, Mays, and Weiser for speaking with us, and for all the work you do on the front lines defending our democracy and keeping our communities safe. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. And if you like what you heard and want to hear more from Attorneys General Nessel and Mays, we encourage you to subscribe to their podcast, Pantsuits and Lawsuits, which you can do by clicking on the link in the chat. It's difficult to believe that just 1 year ago, we were all coming to terms with the truth that Donald Trump would be returning to the White House. And of course, it's been so much worse than we even imagined it would be. But what else is true is that we didn't give up and we didn't give in. Together, we channeled our energy into action. And guess what? It worked. Because no matter what this administration and MAGA Republicans have done to try and suppress us and squander all hope, we haven't let them. You haven't let them. Which is why Democrats won across the board 2 weeks ago and why we'll continue to win in 2026 and beyond. We're grateful that you've joined JDCA in these efforts, and we hope you'll continue to be a part of our movement in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Here are 3 ways you can take action with us right now. 1, please visit jewishdems.org to learn about the myriad of opportunities you can take with us, such as subscribing to our newsletter so you don't miss any of our upcoming events like this, and signing our petitions to members of Congress to defend our values. To do so, please click on the link in the Resources tab. 2, speaking of networks, if you would like to get more involved with one of our many local JDCA organizing networks across the country, made up of grassroots volunteers, or our National Jewish Spiritual Leaders Network, please click on the link in the Resources tab. And finally, if you're not already a JDCA member, please consider joining before the end of the year. And if you're already a JDCA member, thank you. And we hope you'll consider increasing your membership level. JDCA members get access to special members-only programs, including our next one on December 2nd, when we'll hear from New York Times bestselling authors Sarah Hurwitz and David Litt on what it means to be a Jewish Democrat today. To become a JDCA member or increase your support, please click on the link in the Resources tab. As we close out today's program, we continue to call for the remains of the final 3 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza to be returned. We won't rest, we can't rest until everyone is home. Thank you again for joining us and for your commitment to our shared values. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.